welcome to another episode of the More Than a Game podcast. I'm your host, Dan Walls, and thank you once again for joining us as we dive into the realms of life, of leadership, and we do so by looking through the lens of Australian basketball. On the show with me today to help me do all this and to share his story is a three-time NBL champion with the Sydney Kings, a three-time champion in the New South Wales Waratah Basketball League, and he's done a great deal of other things off the court, including coaching. I'm speaking of BJ Carter. BJ, welcome to the More Than a Game podcast.
Dan, thanks for having me, mate. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, mate.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing since you finished playing? Where has life taken you since you finished playing?
Oh, mate, it's taken me to the highest of highs and the lowest of lows and everywhere in between. It's finishing playing. It's mate, you've started it off on a tough question. It's finishing playing wasn't really my choice. So to be honest, it took me to I mentioned it, to the lowest of lows. Finishing my career not by choice, by someone making really poor decisions. And not really thinking about how that's going to affect other people's lives. It really affected mine, and just put me back into the workforce and put me back into reality of my career's over, and I started working a job, and like I said, it was a reality check that basketball was over. Bill Tomlinson, you had on. That's a guy I'll always remember for what he did for me on the basketball court, but it's more so what he did for me when my career finished. Was he was the one person that picked up the phone and kind of said, "I can help you with the job if you need." And mate, I'll never forget it, because the phone stops ringing when you stop taking your bag into the basketball court, and it's one thing that professional athletes don't realise is you get lots of pats on the back when you're playing. But as soon as you stop bringing your suitcase or your training bag into the venue, your phone stops ringing and people stop giving a crap. And that's just the honest truth, Yeah. And he didn't. He rang me, and he had a few mates that had a job going of putting up blinds. And I had a pregnant wife at the time, and we had bought our first townhouse, and I need anything. So these guys were unreal and gave me a job, and I'd never used a drill before. I had an old man, so I didn't know how to hammer anything in. I didn't know what timber was. I didn't. So, I did this job and hated every minute of it and cried every day, to be honest. But I look back now and I think it was a great job, and it would have been a great career to keep in. But I was a professional athlete, and now I'm putting blinds up in people's houses, and no one cares about me, and it was hard. So luckily enough, got to then go to Ballarat and get a semi-professional job down there and work in the stadium down there. And that was good, just to get out of Sydney and get out. And then came back and stayed in sport for a while, and sports administration more specifically, and tried to stay into coaching a little bit. Had a good job about 2 years ago in coaching. And unfortunately that was run by a crook as well. He was a bad dude. I just got to the point where I was like, I'm sick of this. I need to go out and get into an industry that where it's safe. And currently now I'm in the construction industry and working at a landfill, and mate, driving heavy machine and doing a bit of client relations, and been there 2 years, and I actually really, really enjoy it. There's no pressure through all this COVID and this pandemic. It's the one time I actually sat back and with my wife now and said, I'm glad I'm not in sport. It's been so fickle for me the last few years, and in the last part of my career, that my current job hasn't wavered, and I've been able to keep food on the table and the mortgage repayments going. 3 kids now, so I'm that's kind of I gave you kind of the quick version, but that's where I'm at the moment, and happy though. I'm happy.
Absolutely, mate. That's a key thing, and we'll touch on the 7 seasons in the NBL in just a moment. But I guess you dabbled into coaching afterwards as well, and you spoke briefly about the transition there. A lot of the conversations I've had with some of the ex-players on the podcast have been talking about the transition from professional athlete into, I guess, the working world. Was that a difficult transition to make? And you mentioned how it all ended for you in the professional sense anyway. I guess, we talked about this before we started. It sort of shows what really matters in life. So yeah, how was that transition for you coming out of playing professionally?
Mate, it was the hardest thing I've probably ever had to do. And it's one of the it stayed with me for a long time. I reckon it probably stays with me now. Like I dibble dabbled in it a little bit. Like my ex-wife would be able to tell you how hard it was at the time of what we went through, and now my current wife would tell you how hard it's been, like adjusting. And they're in sport in general. I know this is a basketball kind of podcast, but basketball, there is nothing done. And I'm just being honest. In the NBL, from my personal experience, there is nothing done for that transition from a professional athlete into when your career ends and stops. There is nothing. And I question how much is actually done in games that are a bit bigger, footy and cricket and whatever, AFL. Because like I said, and I've stolen that analogy, but once you stop bringing your training bag into the court or into the footy training, people stop caring. You're not on the TV anymore. You're not earning big money anymore, and that's really, really sad. And it's something I've thought about for a long time, and I wish I got off my ass and kind of did it. I'd love to do some public speaking or some talks to these teams, to the Cronulla Sharks or the Kings or whoever, about, hey, it's so cliche to hear you need something to back up after basketball, but it's not as simple as that. It's the mental side of you can have your qualified accountant or you could have a teaching degree, but once your career ends, and when it ends not on your terms, through a crooked owner, through a knee injury or whatever it is, and then go be a teacher, or go be an accountant, or go be a builder. It's a quick change, and it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy for me that didn't necessarily have something to fall back on. I had basketball and I had administration, and like I said, I got an opportunity through Bill Tomlinson, but I don't think anyone's prepared for that unless you retire on your own accord. You are mentally prepared. Hey, I'm going to stop doing this. But even in saying that, I think there needs to be more done. There needs to be more education and more things out there put in place to help guys transition, because it's hard, mate. And mentally, it got to me, and got me as, like I said, as low as I could be. And I don't think anyone would understand how low I got. Gorgian, the father figure in my life, he wouldn't have a clue. Bill Tomlinson, he wouldn't have a clue. The players I played with, they wouldn't know how much that affected me, because it was done. I had 7 years, you mentioned it, and then nothing. That's it. Hard one. It's really hard.
For sure, mate. And it's understandable. I mean, I can relate somewhat. I never made it to professional level, but for my whole life, from a 10-year-old up until about 22, 23, it was all about basketball and wanted to make it as a professional. And that was my identity, I guess. Like, people would say, how's your basketball going? And how are you doing at this and that? And it was all around basketball. So for me, it took a while to adjust to me not being the basketball, I guess. I'm not the end of basketballer anymore. So for a professional player who's made it their whole career and life trying to make it, they make it, and that's their whole life for a period of time, you can understand why it is so hard. And I've spoken to quite a few about that transition. But the biggest thing I found is the common denominator in all of those, and you mentioned it just then, the transition out of professional sport. The key thing they've got people through is having a mentor or people around them to pull them out or to process things with. So how important was that for you, having people around you that just loved you and were actually there when you mentioned about people, not talking to you as soon as you weren't professional or whatever. But those who did, how important was that in terms of getting you out of that rut?
Yes, super important. But you're kind of touching on some hard points, and to give me some hard questions here, and some stuff that might get me emotional, is because you talk about who was there for you. Not many people were.
Wow.
Not many people were. You know, the phone stops ringing. The people at that time, a lot of the players, you know, Gorge went off to South Dragon, so he had his thing. You know, some of the players got other contracts, not what they wanted, and they got dribs and drabs of kind of the last piece of the pie because of the timing that the Kings went down. But they, you know, the Russell Hinders and Jason Smiths and Mark Wellingtons, they all got another job, so to speak, after playing, which was great for them. But it was me that I got nothing. And Rusty was awesome. He stayed in contact, you know. But honestly, no one. And that's why I'm a big fan. I'll always be grateful for Billy. And I actually only got to tell him maybe a year ago when I bumped into him at a game, he was the one guy that picked up the phone.
Yeah.
And wasn't to say hello. It was to say, hey, man, I can help. And I look at my current life now and through the ups and downs I go through in life, who are the people that have always been around? And it's my mates. It's the guys I played at Sutherland with.
Yeah,
they're the guys I went away with on the weekend. Their families and their kids now, and they're the ones that through playing at Sutherland as a 12-year-old, through playing at the Kings, through going through hell in my personal life, or going through hell with the Kings, they're the ones that have been consistent. Picking up the phone and going, are you okay? You know, the Dean Morrises, the Brendan Gleesons, the Blake Hendricks, Owen Johnston, Robbie McKinlay. So they're the ones that are important to me in my life now. And I know this is a basketball podcast, but basketball, there's a big sour taste in my mouth with basketball. It's just, I've had I started the podcast with, I've had the highest of highs, but I've also had the lowest of lows, and the lowest of lows have hurt. And they've stayed with me, and I had a big chip on my shoulder for a long time, but it's gone to an extent now. But there is that pain there where I struggle to watch, I struggle to keep in contact with it, and my life's about my kids now and what they want to do and what they want to achieve.
Yeah, for sure, mate. That's great to hear. Yeah, sorry to come at you so hard so early, but I know that your story has, I guess that's the point of the podcast, is to, you know, unearth these stories. So, you know, particularly the season of life we're in is hard and people are going through tough times. So if we can sort of take some of the lessons out of what you've learned and others have learned and apply it to our own lives, I think it's only going to be beneficial. And when I reflect on your career and having the opportunity to play alongside you for that 1 year, you know, I only played one game in ABA for the Sharks that year, but just going along the training and seeing how you operate. One thing that stood out for me was resilience, number one, but also hard work and hard work ethic. And I'm guessing you've been able to apply that to life now. And that's a big thing I've been speaking about in this podcast, translating the lessons you've learned from sport or basketball at a professional level and applying that to your life now. So how does that hard work ethic been able to translate into your life today?
If I didn't have my current work ethic, I'd be struggling to find a job, to be honest. I wasn't, you know, I was a good student at school. I did my work. I just got to a point where basketball became too important for me, so I didn't do my homework. I didn't do the extra stuff at school, and that's a tough lesson to learn when you become an adult and you got to go and get a job. But Gorgian always said to me, whether it was to me or whether it was to the team, you'll take your skills in basketball into the workforce once everything's finished. And I actually didn't know what he meant. I was like, what, do you do layups at Woolies? You know, when you work at Bunnings, do you do X's and O's? I didn't know what he meant. And finally, when I started to get jobs and I started to get a promotion or I started to get, you know, a pay rise or get given a work car, I'm realizing, hang on, my hard work's paying off. They're seeing my hard work, and the current industry I'm in, you know, learning how to speak to people, you know, taking that from being captain of a basketball team or in the leadership group at the Kings. You know, I was lucky enough to captain the team 3 times at the Kings. That was a huge thing for me to be able to do. But taking that and speaking to influential people, speaking to boomers, speaking to Jason Smith, who's come back from the Olympics, and being able to relate, that's what I've taken into the workforce. And someone's hot-headed or someone needs to calm down or someone needs to kick up the butt, it's how to speak to those people, and that's helped me big time in the workforce. And then adapting to what the workforce needs, what you need to be doing, and working hard enough that you are seen as a good worker, and getting things to pay off. So if I didn't have my mum working, I grew up as a single parent growing up with just my mum. If I didn't watch her work 2 or 3 jobs, and if someone offered her work, she said yes, I question if I would have that. So I'm like that now. If someone needs me to work, I work, and I provide for my family, help provide for my family. With my wife, she works full time as well. So you try to instill that in the kids, that you need to have good work ethic in anything that you do.
That's great, mate. It's good to hear. Good lessons to be passing down. But as I said, hard work ethic, resilient. You went through a lot early on in your life. You mentioned your dad, lost him pretty early in your life, and then I remember your junior career. You spoke about how you're quite short growing up and didn't make those teams early on, representative teams, but you eventually did. One of the coaches told you should have been a jockey or something like that. I remember you mentioning that. But yet you still made it. So where did this hard work ethic come from? Like, what instilled that in you, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mentioned my mum. I watched her work, 3 jobs at a time and drive me and my sisters around to whatever we needed. Like, I recently got married last year, and I said at my wedding, said to my mum, I never ever think, what if my dad was around? What if we were rich? Because I don't regret, or I don't look back at my upbringing and think, I don't think, what if? I'm happy with my upbringing. It taught me a lot. And if I didn't have the work ethic I've got, I wouldn't have done anything in basketball. I didn't have the athletic ability. I wasn't tall. It's my biggest fear for my kids at the moment, especially my sons. I don't want him to be small growing up. It's not easy, I mean, there's worse things in the world, but it wasn't easy. But it's just perseverance, and I just wanted something, and that was to be the best basketballer I could be. And through a bit of luck and through perseverance, I was able to kind of don that Kings jersey, which was the ultimate goal for me. It wasn't the NBA or playing for Australia. I mean, that would have been unreal, but I set a goal as a kid, and I just really wanted to be a King. And it was awesome that I just loved basketball. My school holidays were catching the train up to the stadium and shooting around, and then catching the train back and trying to be a kid. But yeah, I mean, at the time, I found it fun. I found it fun to work hard. I found it fun to go up and shoot around. I found it fun to be fit. I found it fun to compete. And that's what, competing. That's one that I see in kids now, that everyone gets a trophy and everyone does this. But you got to want to win. You got to want to be better than those people in front of you. And I did, and lucky enough, it paid off for me. But I tell you, you mentioned that the coach that said to me at state trials, I never made a state team. I never made anything growing up. And that coach, I remember it was court 3 at Sutherland behind the grandstand. He looked at me and he said, BJ, if you ever become a jockey, just let me know what horse you're riding, and I'll put some money on it. And I got it. He was joking, but, it just reiterated, man, I'm small, and I never thought I was small until people mentioned it. I didn't care. I just went out in the basketball court and played, and I played my hardest, and I did what I did. But, then you start getting comments or people laughing or people asking your age. I'm 16, but I look 8, But I mentioned that. I had an interview in the paper one time, and I mentioned that. Yeah.
And
I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on social media at the moment, but I was at the time. And someone put that up, and that coach actually found me and texted me saying sorry.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was. So I never mentioned who it was. I still won't publicly mention, but he knew who it was, and he wrote me a message saying, mate,
amazing you remember
making the comment, and I apologise. So.
How amazing is that?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, from one coach to another, you mentioned Gorge a few times, and I remember this article. So I looked it up just before the podcast, and it was a journalist that asked Gorgian about you, and great to see him back in NBL, by the way. It's,
sure is.
Back in there. But you mentioned that he was a good mentor to you, great coach, and he said Well, this journalist again asked Gorgian about you, and he said, I want to get this right. In my time coaching, 22 years of players, no one better. I don't say that about anyone. BJ is one of the guys we're most proud of. There's been some guys that have been unbelievably special during my time, but there's been no one better than this guy. If you ask any of the guys you respect in the game who have played here, they will all sing this kid's praises. So you're a kid in his eyes back then. But
yeah.
So that
he called me Dennis the Menace when he first met me because
wow.
he thought I was 16. I was 22. So
wow.
He can call me a kid, mate. That's fine.
So with that in mind, obviously, that's where you got to, and I was towards the end of your NBL career. But 7th season in the NBL started in the 01-02 season under Brett Brown, I believe. How did that come about? You're a development player. Is that how things came about for you?
Yeah, well, no, I mentioned back at the start there was a bit of luck that came with me kind of making it as a king, and you need that, whether you're a stud, down at the NBA Academy, or whether you're making all the state teams or whatever, you're still going to need some sort of luck, and that might just be staying injury free. My luck came about with the Sydney Olympics coming or the Olympics coming to Sydney, and the Kings couldn't train at Homebush anymore. They needed a training venue, I guess, well and truly outside of that area, and they chose Sutherland. And they rang Sutherland and they said, do you have anyone that can go down and train and just be an extra body? And John Suva, God bless him, kind of rang me up and said, head down to Sutherland. They need some players. So I turned up and for the first few trainings, probably didn't do much, sat there and ate protein bars and drank some free Gatorade and got a pair of shorts and a singlet, and if they needed an extra body or a rebounder or whatever it was, someone to train against. That was me. And then Brett Brown would come in and out because he was with the Boomers, and then the development player rule or the development player role got introduced, and they were like, you can have a development player in your squad and they can travel on the road if you need, and they can suit up home games. And Brett chose me to be one of them, and that's where it started. They kind of threw me a singlet and said, "You're going to sign up and sign this contract." And and from there, and then Brett left to go to the NBA, I think, and my heart dropped because I'm like, no one knows me, no one knows who I am. I wasn't this stud growing up. They brought Brian Gorgian in. I was, oh my goodness, I don't have an agent. How am I going to tell this guy, hey, can I be the development player again? And so I just kept turning up to the trainings and kept getting the emails at the time, or the text messages, trainings on here, and I would say I feel like he liked me from the start, but I think he liked me because he thought I was 16. He had me in a room at where we trained, and he said, do you want to go to college? And I said, oh, am I allowed? I signed a professional contract last year. And he goes, oh, no, I think you're allowed. I got a guy. How old are you? And I said, I'm 22. He nearly fell off his chair. And he said, are you kidding? You're Dennis the Menace. I thought you were 16.
Wow.
He goes, don't worry about college. Stay here and I'll develop you.
That's great.
And so, put me in as a development player. And then from there, I was lucky enough to get into the full-time contract and do it full-time. So, that's how it started. Like I said, that bit of luck. If the Kings didn't choose Sutherland as a training venue, then it mightn't have ever happened. But, I'm happy for that bit of luck because
absolutely.
That's
awesome. Special, mate. That's awesome. A lot of kids just dream of playing one game like myself, and that's 7 seasons. So it's obviously something to be thankful for. But when you look back on your time, obviously not just the NBL, but played a number of years with the Sharks, juniors and seniors. Played a season down in the Seabull with Ballarat Miners. What are you most proud of? Obviously, we'll come to the 3 championships that you're a part of there, but with the Kings. But what are you most proud of in your time playing the sport?
To be honest, it would be that I never gave up. I never made state teams. My last year in under 18s, the way it worked for me, Division 1, bottom age, Division 2, and top age, Division 1. And I get to my last year of under 18s and I'm looking around and and the way things are tryouts are going, I'm like, I'm not confident I'm going to make this team.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I'm still good enough to be in that team. And then all of a sudden the team gets read out and I'm in Division 2 and I'm watching the guys that I played with from under 12s all go over to this court and I'm over this other court. My world stopped. And then we're not good enough. Or we don't even, our coach ended up getting deported back to America. So one of my closest mates, Jimmy McInerney, he's fresh out of under 18s, in youth league, he decided, I'll coach it. So he coached it, God bless him. And but we're not good enough, so we we play 18 Division 3. And for someone who's 17 at the time, thinking I've got goals here to make the NBL, this is a huge setback. I look back now, I'm like, I didn't give up. I didn't give up, and the coach I had that cut me, Craig Douglas, he was great. Don't get me wrong. He developed me through my juniors from under 12s to under 18s, but he did cut me, and then he's the youth league coach the next year. Well, I'm like, I'm not going to make this team.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Michael Corcoran came along at Sutherland. Again, God bless him. He wanted to change the culture at Sutherland. It was a bit of a beer drinking league up there at the senior program, and you do it because you like it, but you don't take it that serious. He wanted to change that, and he went around and just grabbed all these juniors and saw people that were training and tapped them, come and try out, and he changed the culture. And it was at that time, the Kings came down to Sutherland, and I was probably fit enough to jump in. But yeah, it's never giving up, the perseverance of trying to make it. That's what I would be most proud of. And then I know you're going to mention the championships. Yep, the NBL championships were fantastic. To be a part of that, to be a part of the first one ever at the Kings.
Yeah,
great. But then what we did at Sutherland and those teams we had to win those 3 championships, like, no, they're not on TV. I can't find kind of footage, but those teams were that good, Dan, to train with on Mondays and Thursdays and to play with on Saturdays. We always joked, and it was kind of tongue-in-cheek, that we always wanted to call from West Sydney to say, hey, do you guys want a trial game? Because we actually think we could have beaten them.
Yeah, well.
We were that confident. We were that clicky. We just knew what everyone was doing. We trained that hard. We didn't want to let anyone down. There was no egos. People wanted to be a part of it. You were young at the time, coming out of 18s, you and Kingista and that. You guys used to train before us, but you could see that you guys wanted to be a part of it in the years to come.
Yeah.
And we loved that. And Sutherland's never won anything in the senior program before.
Yeah. We
won the first one, and then we got a second one. We got a third one, and those years were really special. And I talk about my closest mates. I'm still in contact with all of them.
Yeah.
And we still sit around now, and we still talk about how good those days were. So I've got a lot to be proud of. But individually, like I said, it would go back to just never giving up. And then through that, I got to win some championships in the ABA with Sutherland and lucky with the NBL. So through perseverance and hard work comes success, and
that's it.
And that's what I'm most proud of. Yeah.
That's great, mate. Yeah, I was going to mention those 3 championships with the Sharks because, a lot of you guys came through the juniors together, I guess. And, I was a lot younger and I was playing 18s and actually it was my first year of youth league. I think we tried out with you guys and got a glimpse of sort of the connection that was a part of that group. And I was never going to make it at that point, but just that sense, like, you're like brothers almost, just the way you relate to one another. And it just showed me the importance of not just teamwork, but having that connection in terms of, greater success. So how important is it from a team point of view, not just to focus on teamwork, but to sort of harvest that culture or that connection within the group?
Oh, mate, I think it's the biggest. I think it's the biggest thing. If your group doesn't get along, then you're not going to win. You mentioned it with your podcast with Billy about man management. You were talking about some of the great coaches, and they mightn't be great, the best coaches, but they're probably the best man managers. And that's what coaches in the professional team have to do. They've got to man manage. You've got to man manage egos and where these kids have come from or their backgrounds. And that's what we didn't have at Sutherland. We didn't have any egos, and we were brothers. And anyone that was around that saw those teams play, we were just that connected. I remember Mark Gaze came into our team as an assistant coach, and he stood up at our presentation, like trying to explain to the 50 to 100 people that were out there how close this team was. And he's there going, people were laughing, and he's like, "You don't get it, guys. This team are that close." And they're like, "Yeah, we get it." And he's like, "You don't get it. This team is that close." And we really were. You know, Brendan Gleeson tells a story often that he threw a bad pass to threw a pass to Dane Morris, and Dane Morris, rather than put two hands to catch it, only put out one, and it fumbled out of bounds. And there was no yelling. There was just a look. He just gave Dane a look like, "What are you doing?" And Dane looked back at him and was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry." And then, you know, from there, it was just like, I'm going to get it back. I'm going to get that ball back for you because I've disappointed you in that moment. It's probably the biggest thing in professional sport is you watch, you know, Kyle Flanagan, for example, he just gets dumped from the Roosters, and now he goes plays for the Bulldogs. But I know they have preseason, they live in each other's shadows, but like, you got to make that work. You can't just pick people. You can't pick the best guy and then go put him into another team, and that's going to work. It's not. You got to make it work and somehow get these guys to be mates first and foremost. And that's why sometimes I'm not the biggest NBA fan, because it's very individualized. And players, you wake up one morning and your suitcase's packed and you're playing for another team across the country. You got to find a way to gel, and that's why I think the Melbourne Storm are so good. They find a way to gel. Melbourne Tigers, back in the day with Andrew Gaze, they had that core. You know, if you weren't going to buy into Leonard Copeland's ways and Andrew Gaze's ways, you weren't going to fit. And you need that. You need that core stability.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, that's why, you know, we talk about Gorge being such a great manager and coach. When you look at those three championships with the Kings, you guys had such different teams from the first championship to the third, but yet it still seemed like you had that sort of connection and camaraderie about you guys. So if you can give us a bit of insight into how we did that with such different players and personnel. Like, you did have a call there, but again, you lost quite a few in that first season. So, how did you go about that in terms of building that connection?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, you talk about that core. I believe you need a core group. You know, like Melbourne Storm, you got your Cameron Smiths, your Billy Slater. I shouldn't talk about him too much. I don't like him that way. I wish they were the Sharks. But Gorge was the core. You know, Gorge and Billy Tomlinson, they were the core. Yep, we had different teams, but there were two coaches that were there for the whole time they're winning that culture. And Laurie Watterson is the manager.
Yeah,
they were the core. He's still there.
Yeah.
You know, you got the likes of Shane Hill and Matty Nielsen the first year, and then turns to CJ Bruton and Matty Nielsen. Like, Gorge was very careful about who he brought in, being the better player or that dominant figure, and he showed him a work ethic that, hey, Gorge demanded, I've got a work ethic, and you need to live up to a work ethic as well, because this isn't a league that you can just come over here and have a holiday. This is a good league, and especially with the Americans, he'd get every American off the plane the day they landed, and he wouldn't show them around the town, put them on a tour bus. He'd take them to the gym, and he'd make them work hard, and he'd try and, you know, just flush out the jet lag or whatever, or let them know, hey, I'm getting you 500 shots the day you land. Just this is me letting you know I work hard, you know.
Yeah.
And he did that with every import, and we had some import. I'll tell you what, we had some imports that just did not want to buy in, and when they didn't buy in, then guys would get into him. Jason Smith would get into him. I got confident enough that I could get into him. I knew the culture. I knew the winning ways. Jason Smith had a win under Gorge. But it all, at the end of the day, it all started with Gorge and the respect he demanded, and the culture that he wants to build as a basketball team and as an organisation. It's going to be interesting to see him try to do that down at Wollongong.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. You mentioned you captained the Kings, and you mentioned you sort of grew in that leadership ability. Definitely had that at the Sharks. By my time with that season I had there, I could see definitely a leader amongst men there. But 3 games captain of the Kings. What's important for a leadership point of view for you? You know, what traits, characteristics did you bring into your role as captain? Obviously, as a leader, what was important to you being captain of those clubs?
Probably the biggest one is like setting an example. If you're not going to do the things that you expect of other people, then you're not going to be a good leader in anything. And I'm talking business. I'm talking, at a job site or in sport. There's a lot of people that might scream, rant, and rave because that's what they see on TV. But you don't have to be a loud leader, but you just got to be a leader that sets an example. And if you're not going to do that, then you won't be a good captain. You won't be elected captain. And if a coach elects someone like that as a captain, they're not the right coach. And it goes back to coaching. You're going to be a good coach if you lead by example and set the right standards and have the right philosophies. And I was lucky enough to play under some really good captains, Matt Nielsen, for example, and Jason Smith,
Shane Heal.
Shane Heal.
Yeah.
And pulling guys into line when they need to, but also being accountable for your own mistakes. And I think that's one thing as a captain. It doesn't mean you're flawless. It doesn't mean you're never going to make a mistake. If you can put your hand up and go, "Yep, my fault, shouldn't have done that," or whatever, just admitting to your faults and your mistakes. I think that's being accountable is a big thing about being a leader, and always kind of learning and communicating the right way. And then also, I think some people are just born to be natural leaders. I think you can train to an extent, but some people are just natural leaders. Some people, I can only imagine right now, a Kawhi Leonard. I haven't heard that guy speak his whole career, but the guy plays hard and he's one of the best players in the world at the moment. But he mightn't be a talker; he just might lead by example. Jason Smith was a great captain because he didn't scream at people, but if he did, you knew why. But he would just lead by example every training session and every game, and you learn off that, and you try and take it to somewhere else, whether it's workplace or down at ABA, and get people to buy in.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. Could talk to you all day, but a couple more questions to finish up on is obviously you dabbled in coaching, coached the Sutherland Sharks side after finishing up playing there, and had the opportunity to sow into younger kids and bring them through. But I know you're on the board now, I see, at the Sharks as well. I saw that the other day. I was like, oh, good. But it goes to the point of the importance of, and I know a lot of cultures around the world do this well. Our culture in the West, I don't believe does that well, is passing down, whether that's experience, skills, experiences to the next generation. And I feel like that's such an important thing, and it goes to the heart of being a good mentor as well. So, I see that it's something that you value, and you're doing that with the kids at Sutherland and through coaching and also your own kids. But how important is it to pass down these experiences that you've had in your life and these skills and these virtues, these characteristics to the next generation? And what does that look like?
Oh, it's really important. Again, I mentioned Bill Tomlinson's, when you spoke to him, he said he'll finish up in China or whatever coaching, but he won't finish coaching. He'll always give back because someone always gave something to him. And I think that's really important to do that. And that's why I wanted to coach. I always had an interest in coaching when I thought I'll finish playing. And I loved my first 2 years. I was lucky enough to get Coach of the Year in the competition, and we were successful. We were winning. I think I spiraled away from my beliefs and my work ethic through. I didn't have the balanced life at the time. I was going through some personal battles, and that affected the way I coached, and I didn't put in the effort that I needed to, and I wasn't a great leader. I definitely wasn't leading by example. I was the last one to training and the first one to leave, and finally I was man enough to go, you know what, I'm not doing these guys. I'm doing these guys more harm than I am good by being their coach. So I stepped aside, and they've been successful since I've left. Through just having someone there that's passionate about being there. But when I was there, it was the coaching side of things was great. I started to replicate Gorgian, and I remember having Travis Lane. He was an assistant at North, and he came up and he goes, "You look like Gorgian when you coach." I took it as a compliment, but I was also like, you know what, I don't need to be Gorgian. I need to be me. I can take everything that Gorgon's taught me or Billy
Yeah.
Tomlinson's taught me through my career, but I don't have to talk like them or act like them or
Yeah.
scream, rant, and rave. I need to coach, and that's one thing I'm seeing with some junior coaches. They don't coach; they just yell because maybe they're not educated or they're not doing enough training. And I'd love to see it. A coach is a teacher. We want to teach these guys some skills, and it is hard work. So. Like I said, I stepped away from it and joined the board just to try and help instill some ideas from a general public, or not from a business point of view, from a general public or from a guy that played up at Sutherland, and see if we can get that thing humming again. But
that's good.
Yeah, mate, it's really important for people to give back where they can. But I try to give back with my kids. I try to coach them where I can, and get them up to the stadium or to the footy field, whatever they want to do, and coach them and give back to with whatever I can.
That's awesome, mate. Great to hear. Just before we finish up, a few quick fire questions. Best player you played with? Sharks or Kings or Miners?
Best player I ever played with. I have to say Matty Nielsen, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
Great bloke. I roomed with him for the 1 or 2 years we played together. He was a great player, but so probably something that's not mentioned about him. He's a great bloke off the court. And then the other one would be Russell Hinder.
Yep.
Glenn Saville. They're up there. Rusty's still one of my closest mates. He lives in the States now. We stay in contact. And great dude, great family man, great player, funny. One of the funniest guys I know. I mentioned the guys from Sutherland before, but yeah, Dane Morris and Robbie McKinley, Blake Hendricks. They were Brendan Gleeson. They were great guys to play with. So
yeah, absolutely.
I was lucky.
Absolutely. Best teammate? Is there a best teammate out of any of those? Doesn't necessarily need to be the best player, but brought the jokes to training, had a bit of laugh.
Yeah, probably the guys I mentioned, Sav and Rusty Hinder.
Yeah,
they were just my kind of guys. They didn't live and breathe basketball, but they on the court we loved it. Off the court we got to talk about something else. Talk about surfing or just have a genuine joke. Like I said, Rusty was one of probably the funniest blokes I know, and Sav and I hit it off the year that we played together. So they were great from that perspective. And again, I like to always mention the Sutherland guys because they're just my closest mates now, and keep mentioning them. But I could go on and on and on about some of those guys that I played with at Sutherland. They were, better blokes than they were players, and they were really, really good players. I think some of them could have made it. And no doubt. Yeah, great guys.
And just finally, best game you played. Is there any game that stands out?
Yeah.
Surely, mate. Surely.
No, probably the last championship we won for Sutherland. I think the first few championships we won, we had Cameron Tovey playing with us, and he was just a wrecking ball. He was unbelievable. And so the last year, not having him, I felt like I had to step up a little bit and had a career high, and we won on the road. It was up in Central Coast, and we had 37 that game. So I think that game stands out for me, and especially in a big game, a grand final, and then, and then in the NBL, there was a couple, but there's one that there was a game where CJ Bruton was injured and Luke Kendall was injured, and me and Luke Martin were both the backup 1 and 2, and we had to hold the fort while these guys were out for a few weeks, and we ended up beating West Sydney, and it was only 11 points, but it was 11 points that I probably needed to have for us to win, and like I said, it was a big game because West Sydney at the time were really, really good. So that, and a couple of games, I think I had 20 points one game. That was always good to kind of rack up some points. And I think games in the NBL for me was when guys got injured. I got a bit more of an opportunity. I mentioned Luke Kendall. He got injured, and I had to step up and play his role. We played Wollongong, and I think my stat line was 5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. So things like that, where I just contributed across the board, was good.
Yeah.
Stepping up where I needed to. So
that's great, mate.
Yeah.
Good memories, good times, eh?
Yeah.
Well, it's good to rehash it all with you, mate, and appreciate your time today. But BJ, thanks for joining the More Than a Game podcast.
Good on you, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.